Hi, this is the Reverse the Classroom session for health and lifestyle. Now, the idea of this is for you to go through a large amount of the information that's then going to be taught during the actual unit itself, so that when you come to being taught about it, you've already got a pretty good knowledge. And so the idea then is you can then learn faster, more accurately, and make more progress during lessons because you've already got that kind of level of knowledge already. Okay, and this is then Reverse the Classroom. And then at the end of the video, right, what there'll be then is there'll be 5 questions then you write out in your exercise book. Now, for the whole unit itself, this is kind of the path. We're going to be talking about diet, healthy diet, unhealthy diet. There's food tests. We're going to do digestion. We're going to do enzymes. We're going to do about drugs, like medicinal drugs and legal drugs, smoking, alcohol, and at the end, there'll then be a test. So it's actually a very, very big unit, but it does lead on a huge amount into units in year 9, 10 and 11. Now to start off with, right, what we've got here is we've got these 7 food groups. And what I've done is I've just written the 7 food groups down this side here with a role and kind of an example of each one. So carbohydrates, right, their main role in the body is to provide energy. Best examples, pasta, rice, sugar. Proteins. Proteins, their main role is for growth and repair. And the best sources of proteins is meat, green veg, eggs and fish. Fats, right? Fats are for insulation. I've got plenty of that. Energy. And good sources are things like butter and margarine. Minerals. Minerals and vitamins, if I kind of do those two together, minerals and vitamins are both kind of used to make chemicals within the body. They're additions to enzymes and additions to chemicals that are required. Minerals, found in cereal and bread. Vitamins, found in fruit and vegetables. Water. Right, now water is obviously the fundamentals of life. Our whole point in water is to keep you hydrated, and if you're not hydrated, then all the other things will not happen. There will be no chemical reactions or respiration or anything happening in the body. And it's pretty much any liquid. Now obviously if you've got olive oil, right, then there's not particularly very much water in olive oil, right, but any other kind of liquid, soup or different types of food, even your vegetables have got considerable amounts of water in them. The final one, fibre. Fibre is kind of the solid matter within the food that you eat. So if you eat Weetabix, what there is there's loads and loads of fibre in it, and it kind of fills your intestines, keeps you regular and bulks up your food. Good sources of that, fruit, veg, cereals, bread. Now, there are a number of different practicals in this unit. Excuse me. One of them is burning food. Right, now the idea of burning the food is to look at the amount of energy that's then provided. And it's quite a simple practical really. What you have is you have a set volume of water in a boiling tube. You put a thermometer into the boiling tube, which is there. And then what you do is you get your food, you set it alight and you put it onto a mounting needle. It's just like a long needle really, a thick needle. And then when it's burning, what you do is you put it underneath the water. All right, what you can do is you can kind of compare different foods to the amount of temperature increase there is on that water. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through the food tests. Okay, now the food tests are part of a required practical. So what you've got to be able to do is you've got to be able to know them inside out. So we're going to start off with starch. Okay, now what you do is you put your food sample into a boiling tube. Then you add iodine to it, and iodine is kind of like an orange-brown colour. Okay, if you add the iodine to your food sample and it turns blue-black, which is kind of that colour, that means there's then starch present. So a positive result is blue-black for starch. The second one is glucose. Now glucose is kind of like a bit of a more complicated one, right? Except for the fact that you'd still add your food sample to a boiling tube. You add 5 drops or so of Benedict's solution. Then what you do is, the difference is you heat it to 80 degrees C in a water bath. You don't put it underneath a Bunsen burner, because if you put it underneath a Bunsen burner, what will happen? It will just heat up too quickly. So you put it in a water bath. Okay, so a water bath is usually a bowl, a beaker of water, and what you can do is then you can heat the water up slower because there's a greater volume of liquid. Now, again, Benedict's is quite interesting because not only has it got blue and these 2 colours here, it's actually got a variety of colours. It starts at blue and it goes to brick red. Now, I always forget kind of the order that the colours go because of the variety. So I'm just going to go like that. Richard of York gave battle indigo violet, which is then the other 2 colours of the rainbow off the side there. So it's the colours of the rainbow backwards. So if there's no glucose, it's blue. If there's loads of glucose, it's red. These colours are then kind of the in-between, right? But the colour order is Richard of York gave battle in vain. It's the colours of the rainbow backwards. Protein, right? Again, it's quite simple. It's a bit like the starch one. So what you do is you put your food substance, okay, into a boiling tube. Add Biuret. Biuret is blue. It's like a pale blue colour. Shake it together, and the Biuret will then turn to a lovely kind of lilac-y purple colour if there is protein present. Fats. Put a piece of food on a piece of paper, right, or brown paper. Lift the sample off in about a minute, or you could rub it. If fat is present, then there's an oily mark left on the piece of paper. Okay, and you can see it here. It looks pretty grim. Okay, there's the oily mark. Think about your chips, right? When you buy some chips from the chippy, what you do is you go home and the paper's then kind of gone a little bit see-through. That's a test for fat. There's also another one, which is add your food substance to ethanol and water. And if you add it to ethanol and water, what it can do is it will then go cloudy. Okay, sometimes it's called milky white. Right, so what happens is your ethanol and water in a boiling tube is nice clear, it just looks like water really. You add fat to it, or a food substance that's got fat in it, what it does, it goes cloudy, and it's often called milky white. Right, so what I'm going to do on this one is I'm just going to go through the digestive system, right, going from top to bottom, if they're the appropriate phrases for it. So, start off with the mouth, and then the gullet. Now, I don't like the word gullet. I like esophagus. Right, so food goes in the mouth, and the idea of the mouth is then for the teeth to then break it up into smaller parts, and then you get some enzymes, salivary amylase from the salivary glands. It then goes down the esophagus, so in the mouth, down the esophagus to the stomach. Okay, often what I'll do is I'll pronounce stomach as stomach, right, even though it's completely stupid pronunciation for it, right, it helps remember it. So what we've then got is we've got the stomach here. Inside the stomach, we've got hydrochloric acid, and the whole idea of hydrochloric acid is to neutralize any food that then goes in, or sterilize rather, any food that then goes in. Then the food comes out of the stomach and it goes into a small part called the duodenum. Now the duodenum is the first part of the small intestine, and it's important because what it does, it's where the liver, the gallbladder, the bile duct and the pancreas feed in. Now what the liver does, the liver produces bile, right? What bile does, it emulsifies fats, which means breaks it down. So the liver produces the bile, it's then stored in the gallbladder, and then it's allowed into the duodenum, into the small intestine, via the bile duct. Also, the pancreas feeds in at those points then as well. And now what the pancreas does, it produces loads of enzymes. Now I'm not going to go into the functions of loads of different enzymes, right? But it produces an enzyme called lipase, which breaks down fat, protease, that breaks down proteins, and carbohydrase, which breaks down carbohydrates. Right, so now what we've done is we've gone through the duodenum, Now what we do is we hit this kind of spaghetti looking one here, which is the small intestine. I want the small intestine, it absorbs all the digested food. Then it goes into the large intestine, which only absorbs one thing, which is water. And kind of a little strand that is off the large intestine is something called the appendix. And the appendix we don't use anymore, but it used to be used, or a lot bigger, when we used to digest vegetable matter a lot more. It then goes along the large intestine, gets to here, rectum, and I guess the rectum's main job is to store the feces before they come out, and then the anus is then where the actual feces are allowed out. Now, in the digestion, I mentioned before about a number of enzymes. There's 3 enzymes that we need to know about. First one is carbohydrase. I know it's an enzyme because it ends in ASE. And what that does is it breaks long carbohydrate molecules into sugar molecules that are often glucose. Protein digestion. It works in a very, very, very similar way. What they are is they are proteases. And I know it's an enzyme because it ends in ASE. And what a protease does, it breaks up long protein molecules into amino acids. They can then be used to rebuild proteins in the body. Fats. Fats is due to lipase. Right? Lipid is kind of like a posh name for fats. And again, I know this is an enzyme because it ends in ASE. So what you have is you have your fat. Lipase breaks it down into 2 products, glycerol and fatty acids. I don't know why, but it always runs off my tongue better saying fatty acids and glycerol, but that doesn't really matter. Now, what exactly is an enzyme? An enzyme is a biological catalyst. Right? What a biological catalyst is, it's a substance that increases the rate of a reaction. And the whole point in it is to convert large insoluble molecules into small soluble molecules. So you've got your burger, which is a big, large, insoluble kind of mass. Digestion breaks it down into small, soluble molecules that you can then absorb. So what I'm just going to talk about here then is enzyme activity. Now all enzymes have an optimum temperature and an optimum pH. That means the best that they can then work at. This graph at the bottom left here is all about temperature. And what you'll find is that kind of peak bit there is probably at 37 degrees C, which is standard body temperature. And the way the graphs works is, at this start here at 0 degrees C, the enzymes are doing something, but not particularly very much. The rate increases until it gets to this point here, which is their fastest rate of reaction, which is their optimum temperature. Then, after the optimum temperature, what it does, it decreases pretty rapidly. And that is called denature, which means the changing of the shape of the enzyme so they don't work the same. Now, pH is much kind of more symmetrical, really. That is probably around about pH 7, right? Normal body pH. And on either side, it is dead symmetrical in the fact that it works well at pH 7, then as soon as you go either way, again, what it does, it changes the shape and it denatures the individual enzymes. Now, drugs. All right, here's a definition of a drug. A drug is a chemical that changes the way the body or the mind works. Okay? Now, there's 2 different types of drugs that we can talk about. We can talk about medicines, that are drugs that help people suffering from something, or we can talk about recreational drugs, taken for pleasure, legal and illegal drugs. Okay, first one here is painkillers. Right, what they do is painkillers reduce the pain and cause the feeling of numbness. Right, but painkillers can be addictive. Most painkillers, or there are lots and lots of different painkillers that you can get that you can just buy over the counter, like aspirin, paracetamol, right? But there is also illegal painkillers, even though you wouldn't kind of see them as a painkiller, like heroin, which takes away the pain. Now with painkillers don't actually solve any problems. What they do is they just kind of mask the pain. The pain is still there. Stimulants, right? Stimulants increase the activity of the brain. Should be doing this in red really, shouldn't I? Increase the activity of the brain. They make you feel more alert, more awake, higher energy levels, but they can also be a little bit unpredictable when you're sort of dealing with personality and things like that. So if you take a strong stimulant, right, and it can affect you in all sorts of different ways. Main stimulants, caffeine, nicotine, right, they're the ones that are out there and kind of legal to take. I have at least 2 cups of coffee before 9 o'clock in the morning, right, just to make my brain work better and make me more alert. Another stimulant is obviously illegal cocaine, which obviously is not a good idea to be taking that. Depressants are kind of the opposite of stimulants, really. What they do is they reduce the activity of the brain. They can make you feel sleepy, reduce anxiety. However, depressants can be addictive. Right, now the main ones that are kind of out there, alcohol is a depressant, even though you may well not think it is, because people then get a little bit more sort of happy and agitated when they're, well, not agitated, happy and active when they're taking alcohol, right, but it is actually a depressant. Other ones that aren't so good, sleeping tablets, right, now even though you can get them as prescription, right, they are addictive. And obviously solvents, which are a depressant, which I cannot believe that people do. That's when the people are then sniffing glues and aerosols. Now, on here, what I've got is I've got a table that talks about illegal drugs, right? And what you're going to do is, in the unit, you're going to be talking about heroin, cocaine, cannabis, ecstasy, and solvents. And you need to kind of know what they look like. You need to know effects, the law, and risks. Now, on the next number of slides, what there is there's kind of a lot of information about each one of those drugs. Now, I'm not going to do loads of talking through it, but what the best thing to do would be to then pause the video, read through the information, so then you've got more kind of knowledge, personal knowledge, because obviously it's useful to know about these things and the reasons why not to do them, right? But also you'll be able to talk more clearly in lessons. Heroin. So with the heroin, we've got appearance, risks, effects, and the law. Pause the video and have a read through it. Cocaine. Again, I've got appearance, risks, effects, and the law. Pause the video and have a read through the information. Cannabis. Appearance, risks, effects, the law. Pause the video again and have a read through the information. Ecstasy, ease. What we've got on this one then is, again, we've got appearance, risks, effects, and the law. Pause the video again, please. Solvents, appearance, risks, effects, the law. Pause the video again and read through the information. Okay, so they are then sort of the main illegal drugs that are just out there, right, that people are then making a lot of money and making people's lives very miserable. Smoking, right, so what we're just going to do now is we're just going to talk a little bit about smoking and the effects of smoking. 3 significant things given off from smoking. We'll start off with nicotine, which is then the one at the bottom. Nicotine is the addictive drug that is in a cigarette or in a vape, I guess. And what it does, it affects the central nervous system. It increases the heart rate, narrows blood vessels, causing high pressure. Now, it's a substance that is naturally produced within the brain, right? But what you're doing each time is you're then taking in nicotine, which is then having significant effects. And it is the addictive part of a cigarette. Now, there are many, probably tens of hundreds of 1,000 other different substances within smoking, within a cigarette, and I will mention a few of those later. But 2 of the main bad ones are carbon monoxide, which is a gas that's often called the silent killer, because what it does it affects the red blood cells. And the second one on here is tar. Right? Now, if you think about it, if you're a smoker and you just get some tar off the road, the black stuff off the road, and sort of put it in your lungs, right? It's kind of almost like the same thing, obviously on a much, much smaller scale. It's a brown, sticky substance made of particles, and it deposits in the lungs and coats the surface of the alveoli. Right? So it's a bit like breathing in vaporized tar. Okay. Now, smoking kills around 5 times more people in the UK than road traffic accidents or other accidents, poisoning, overdose, all right, manslaughter, suicide, all put together. All right? So you can just see what a good idea it really is to smoke. Smoking when pregnant can have huge effects on the baby, causing miscarriage or putting a child at higher risk of diseases. Now, this is then kind of adds in a little bit more stuff to do with the content in a cigarette. Stearic acid, says there, candle wax. It's got ammonia in it, which you find in toilet cleaner. Toluene, which is an industrial solvent. Arsenic, you'll all have heard of that. It's even got a skull and crossbone there, which is a poison. You've got cadmium in it, which is from batteries. You've got acetone, which is in paint stripper. You've got hexamine, which is barbecue lighter. You've got butane in it, which is lighter fluid. You've got benzene, which is in petrol fumes. You've got nicotine, the drug that people get addicted to is actually in insecticides. You've got carbon monoxide, which is the silent killer. You've got acetic acid, which is vinegar. And you've got methanol, which is rocket fuel. And obviously all these things are in very, very small doses, right? But it just kind of makes me think, why on earth does anybody actually smoke? Alcohol, right? Now, alcohol is just out there exactly the same as cigarettes, okay? But often people won't think about the damage that's caused by alcohol to the same effect as cigarettes. Short-term effects, right? So if you have a drink, right, then what will happen is you'll get sleepy, you'll get poor balance, you'll lose muscle control, you'll get blurred vision, and you might get slurred speech. And it generally doesn't take very much, right? Depending on how often you drink, to get all those different symptoms. Long-term effect, damage to the liver, heart, lungs, stomach and brain. The liver removes alcohol from the bloodstream, so it destroys the liver, and because the liver takes the alcohol out and you damage it, it's then going to get worse. And over time, alcohol can lead to something called cirrhosis, which is where the liver gets permanently damaged. And this is then kind of what it looks like. This, hopefully, is what your liver looks like. This is then a cirrhosis liver. All right? And what a cirrhosis liver, and the colour changes on that, is all to do with scarring on the actual liver itself, which cannot repair. Now, I've just gone through huge amounts of information. Now, it's a big unit, but it does lead on to lots of different things. Now, the 5 questions I'm going to want you to write in your exercise book. You write down the title, or reverse the classroom, and then what you do is you write out the question, name 5 illegal drugs. And under it, what you're going to do is you're going to literally write down 5 drugs that are illegal that I've talked about in this video. Then what I'm going to do is I want you to write down what is a drug, and I want the definition. Number 3, it says there, describe the process of fat digestion. So I want to know about enzymes, right? And I want to know what the enzyme is and what is produced. I want to know this test for sugars. I want to know the name of the chemical that is used. I want to know any conditions that need to be in the actual experiment itself. And I want to know the colours. Number 5, name 5 substances in a cigarette. Okay, I think I went through maybe 15, right? I just want you to list 5. Now, that then is the reverse the classroom. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to do a lot more of that information in class, taught to you by a teacher. But if you go in and you've already done this, you're going to have a lot of knowledge before that unit's taught. And then what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to build on that knowledge much, much more effectively.